This is a sketch, a cartoon, if you will, done by a local candy maker named Piper. He was also the first socialist on the city council, and he was a popular guy in town. And he would make cartoons of events like, for instance, the lynching here in 1882 of 3 outlaws, 2 of whom had been to trial and 2 of whom had not been to trial. They were simply pulled from the jail and lynched between the maples that stood to the side of the Yesler home on James Street. This was Henry and Sarah Yesler's home. And Jean has used the, what was your statement about sulfur and?
No, just that this was an example of sulfur in Seattle history, you know, as contrasted to Elysium. This is near the beginning of our sulfurous past, and there are other examples of that, but this was certainly a recent one we used in the column.
You mean everything that's dark and stinks?
Everything that's dark and has the stench of hell.
Okay, sure. And this certainly did. So these guys were hanged, and although from the evidence as it's been described in a smaller community by people who were near the acts, that they probably were guilty, and they were still hanged without fair trial. And you can see the ravenous, sort of, the bloodlust of the public, so to speak, right there in that cartoon.
By the way, where is, in geography, where is Yesler's house?
It sits on, not on the footprint of, but within the footprint of the Pioneer Building, behind the pergola. So if you're looking from the pergola east, you're looking in the direction of Yesler's house.
Northeast corner of James and First was called Front then, and the maples were on the north side of James, just to the east of the pergola.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's very. Where'd you find this, by the way? Who found this?
This is fairly commonplace. If you study local history in some detail, you will know this cartoon because it's was published in the Harpers, and it was there that Yesler, whom you can see, Jean pointing where Yesler is at the bottom, at the middle of the bottom. He's whittling. That's what Henry Yesler liked to do, is carry around a piece of wood and whittle.
So that's Henry. That's Henry Yesler whittling while some people are getting hung.
Well, some people. Not only that, and this was profoundly offensive to some of the people who came to the column, including a friend of ours who's a historian. But we quoted Henry Yesler in the first title of the column, which did not appear in the Times. They thought it was a little bit much, but we put it on the blog, and the title was Henry Yesler's line that the trees that grew next to his house, which you see in the first picture ever taken, or extant picture, he said that was the finest fruit that ever hung from those trees.
You know, of course, what we're doing at the town hall is called First Hill and Beyond. So this lynching is not First Hill, but what it does is it links to another picture, which is the first picture taken of Seattle that is also of the Yesler home, and it looks to the horizon, and there is the forest at Fifth Avenue. So you see we've linked it to the First Hill lecture, and hence the credibility of our title, First Hill and Beyond.
This is what I would interpret as Elysium. There are actually 3 photos which we'll be talking about in First Hill and Beyond. This is the Beyond part of our show. And we'll dance down from First Hill on the advice of, what was his name, Paul? The picture was identified by a fellow who lived on First Hill.
Oh, yes, Joshua Green. Joshua Green, who lived to be 105, I think. Yeah, the banker, shipping magnate. Joshua Green.
Who built his own building across from what is now Westlake, like just kitty corner to Westlake.
Yeah. Which is still standing, right?
Which is still standing.
But a famous investigative reporter with local television found this negative, part of a collection in an antique store. He took this particular slide to Joshua Green, who had been around a long time. He said, "What is this, Joshua?" And Joshua said, "Oh, that's Graham. That's the madame, the prostitute, and those are her girls. And that's in their very lavish whorehouse or house of what do you call it?
House of Elysium, I think he was
House of
going.
Elysium. Thank you very much.
Elysium.
And so that's what it was. This was a great find for Bill Spidell and his all of his stories that go with the Underground. So he puts a big picture of this up in the lobby at Underground Tour, and forever after we identify it as Graham and her girls at 3rd and Washington, southwest corner. Building's still there, except that it isn't, because I later found the collection that this came from, and the date's later than Graham's death. So this is probably some local prostitutes, but we don't know where. It's not Graham, though.
By the way, that looks like a guy right there. That one person, dark hair in the back.
Really, yeah, they look to be on downers, don't they?
What years do you think this is?
This is around 1910, 11.
I see.
Going with the collection of negatives, glass negatives from which this came. So they're consistently from right around 10, 11, 12, and this is one of them.
This is a very well-appointed place. Who was using this? Do you know? Do we know?
No. See, that's the point of the story. Joshua Green identified it as Graham at the southwest corner of 3rd and James, I'm sorry to blow this so much, Washington, but it can't be. It can only be that if this picture is unique in that collection of having been taken earlier. I hold out that's a possibility. And Green was, of course, well, he described escaping from this whorehouse down a drain pipe on the outside to avoid the vice squad. So, I mean, he did have some intimate knowledge of the place.
All right, well, if he was going, then the people who were going there were the more well-appointed folks of the city.
Yeah, they were. It was a popular place. She was protected. She gave a lot of money in taxes. She when she died, in her will, there was a lot of money given to the city, so she was very popular.
What's your favorite part of this picture? You have a favorite part?
Well, the statue holding the lamp is marvelous, but I think the gal sitting with her right hand on the piano
would be Graham.
That would be Graham.
Who said that was Graham? Yeah.
She's sort of a magnificent. She looks like a force of nature to me.
She is a very commanding woman. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. She even gives you a selection of her girls to choose from. You'd think she'd just assign one. I kind of like the pictures on the wall on the back there with the broad hips.
Have you noticed that the pictures on the wall are all facing away from the girls? So they're
why is that?
There's a kind of a diffidence, or maybe not diffidence. Maybe it's an actual what would you say, like a dismissiveness, not modesty. Yeah. I think. As opposed to the girls in the foreground.
Good point. We know you've come in the room, but we're not ready to pay attention to you yet.
This is much later. This is a wonderful story that actually Paul will tell, but it's from the World's Fair, and outside of the World's Fair, there were opportunities to see girls performing in the All Together, and maybe not quite All Together.
I don't think the All Together.
You don't think it was?
No, they're dressed. The idea here, and this was not outside the fair; it was in it.
Well, first you have to talk about your first assumption when you saw this photo.
I first gotten a collection of negatives from a friend who died, and he took this picture. And so I was looking through the negatives. I said, "My gosh, look at that! You've got into into the intimate circumstances of a showbiz where the women are in the dressing area there. It's like New Orleans. Remember the famous photographer went into the whorehouses? I said, my goodness." And then I looked through the rest of the negatives in this particular package, and I could see that, no, actually, this was the stage. And people paid to go in and watch women, read magazines and put on their dresses. And then they go up on top of the dressing room and perform to a fake audience that was drawn on a wall. I'm kidding you not. I've got pictures that show it. Although I don't think we're showing it in the lecture.
No, we won't.
Well, it's too dicey, isn't it?
No, but there is the picture I have up. I actually have it up.
Oh, you do, really?
Dicey. I hate to tell you this, but here is.
Oh yeah, there they are. See them up
here
there?
They are.
Yeah.
And there's the painted-on audience behind. This is like a production of Noises Off from 1961.
At the bottom, you see the back of the heads of the poor innocents who paid money to get in and look at this stuff. See?
Wait,
that's the audience at the bottom.
This was at the World's Fair?
At the World's Fair.
This was one of the rides at the World Fair, one of the events at the World Fair.
Kind of a ride, yeah.
I thought it was across Fifth Avenue. This was actually within the center grounds.
Yeah, it was right there. Right there. I think they might have gotten rid of this one. I think it was got too many objections or something.
How does this work into the fair's theme of City of Tomorrow?
Well, let's actually go to the more important question. How the heck does this fit into the First Hill lecture? Gene, how do you do that?
Well, that's why we chose Beyond as part of our title.
He just has a category. It'll cover everything. I think that's a smart way to act and operate.
I think so, too. No, we promised Elysium and a little sulfur.
Yeah, we put First Hill and Beyond, thinking, of course, first about other hills. But then we realized, wait, Beyond, that means anything.